You're listening to Legacy Lawyers, hosted by Michael Haslam and Nathan Croxford.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Legacy Lawyers podcast. I am your host, Nathan, today, and I have Brian Edwards, the esteemed Brian Edwards, joining me today. And we are going to talk about something that has caused quite a stir, with some of our clients. And I've got some friends and family in the real estate business. This is impacting them, and there's been a little bit of a panic. We're going to see if we can get to the bottom of what's going on and hopefully give some people some clarity on this new federal reporting requirement. So, Brian, tell me, what is all the fuss about?
Yeah, well, happy to be here, Nathan, with you. I love doing these podcasts with you and Mike.
Yeah.
It's fun being here, so I enjoy it. Okay, the fuss. So the federal government has decided they want to try to crack down a little bit more on money laundering and criminals who are using real estate in their criminality, I guess, in their what they do. A lot of times they will buy real estate and put it into an entity or like a trust to try to hide what they're doing, or
Is obviously taking money that was obtained through illegal enterprise, like illegal gambling rings or extortion or other types of theft, or cash money that was obtained maybe through running prostitution rings or other types of illegal activity, and then trying to make that money look like it was legitimately obtained and mix it in with other pools of money so that it can't be traced or tracked by investigators that are trying to crack down on the criminal activities, right? So a way that you could do that with real estate is you could fund a business entity with ill-begotten cash and turn around and purchase real estate, residential properties, and just try to make it look like you're running some residential rental properties, right? So renting houses or apartments or condos to individuals. And so I think that's the crux of what they're trying to crack down on. And unfortunately, when they're trying to crack down on criminals, it impacts all of us because we all become subject to the same reporting requirements, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think one thing to just add in the criminal, I mean, I'm not a criminal mastermind. I don't know what's going on, but a lot of times these transfers, you can say, are like when they're getting real estate or they're trying to purchase it, it's just a cash sale. It's like, hey, I have a bunch of money. Let me give this to you while I purchase your home. Because they're, with normal financing that a lot of us go through to purchase homes, that's required. There's requirements on the federal government side to report it already with like the mortgage lender or the bank or whatever. And so a lot of these transfers are done at cash value and just say, here's your cash, give me the house, and it's done. That's really the particular part that they're cracking down on is that. But we'll get into that more. But that's
so I mean, that's where the loophole is, right? Is that you do, when you're using a mortgage, you're getting a loan, there's all kinds of federal reporting that goes into making sure that those transactions are done properly and legally. And it's hard to, to disguise those kinds of transactions. Whereas just an outright purchase of real estate for cash, that's the part that is typically not regulated and doesn't have reporting requirements. And therefore, it's an easy way for people to fly under the radar and stay hidden and to hide the illegitimate criminal activities.
Exactly. So that's kind of what's going on here. Is the particular transfer that the government's trying to crack down on. And that's what we need to start. So what the government has said is, hey, we want you to start reporting these particular types of transfers of residential real estate. And we'll get into the steps here in just a minute, but that's where they're coming from. Is we're trying to stop and catch criminals in order to do this. So that's why they want us to start reporting these requirements. And so ready to just jump into
Yeah. So when does it apply? Because I mean, I've had multiple phone calls just this week alone where I have clients who are, I'll give you an example that we deal with all the time. Um, they are setting up a trust, and as part of the funding of that trust, they're going to sign a deed and record that deed with the county. And what that's going to do is cause the ownership of their primary residence for the most part. Sometimes there's rentals, but in the particular case that I'm talking about, this was just a single mom that is trying to protect her family. And one of the things we're going to be doing is moving her home into a revocable trust. And she still has a mortgage on that property, but she emailed me and wanted to make sure that this thing didn't apply to her.
Yeah, and I think so. Let's go. I'll talk about the conditions real quick and what they're looking for. The test, I guess you can say, is what this is on whether or not your transfer to a deed or your transfer to a trust or your transfer to an LLC or you transfer to a person, does that count or not? And so this is kind of the government has outlined a test for us to figure that out. And then we'll get into your particular.
Let me just, sorry to interrupt you. Let me just throw in our disclaimer, and then I'll let you dive into that. So, Brian and I are both attorneys. We're both estate planners, and we deal with real estate all the time in the context of our planning. But the purpose of our podcast today is not to provide legal advice to anyone. We are in the edutainment business. And so for purposes of today, anything that you hear on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. You should always seek out a qualified licensed attorney to give you legal advice. And when we say they, the federal government, this is specifically FinCEN, so the financial crimes arm of the federal government that kind of monitors transactions to make sure that they're trying to catch criminals that are involved in financial crime activities.
Yeah.
Okay, take it away, Brian.
Okay, yeah. So there's a test, as we're saying, that they have come out with, that the government has come out with. First, you got the property that's being transferred has to be residential real property. Second, the transfer is non-financed. Third, the property is transferred to a certain type of entity or trust. And then fourth, if you meet all those, is there an exception? And if there's no exception, then it's one to report. But we're gonna break those down one by one. First, is this residential real property? Just to clarify, they say that has to be in the United States. So by all means, go buy your homes in Mexico and the Bahamas and wherever you want. You don't have to report in that situation. That's just something on the side. Has to be in the United States. Real property, residential real property, they're saying that it is real property containing a structure designed principally for the occupancy by 1 to 4 families. So very simply, a home, a condo, a townhouse, even an apartment building that would go up to 4 apartments in it would count in this.
A duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, a fourplex, whatever you want to call those.
So that's the residential real property. So if you have that, then we go on to the next step.
So back up one step there. So also raw land on which you intend to build a structure that would be for the occupancy of 1 to 4 families. So the reason they're requiring that is because this is a big misconception that I deal with on a regular basis. Is people think I'm actually, there's a 2-part transfer. I've got to transfer. There's going to be a deed recorded when I buy land. And then when I finish the house on that land, there's going to be a deed to my house. No, that's not how it works. The deed is for the ground, and the deed covers any and all structures that are thereafter built upon the land, if we're talking about raw land to begin with. So could it be either existing structures or land on which those types of structures are about to be constructed?
All right, that's a good clarification, because that does happen too all the time. People buy that land. So that's what we're looking at here for residential real property. Excuse me. The second test then, or the second prong, I guess you can say, the test is that it has to be a non-finance transfer. What they technically say that is it's a transfer that does not involve an extension of credit to all transferees, the people who are obtaining the home. that is both secured by transferred property and extended by the financial institution, subject to certain programs run by the government. What it's basically saying here is that if it's not a traditional way of purchasing a home, so again, most of us, we go in, we need to get a mortgage, we need to get a loan on the house. Those are heavily regulated anyway, like we already discussed. So if you are doing that, then that does not count in this situation. So just the example of me buying my house doesn't count. Now, me taking my house and putting it into a trust, okay, that's a transfer of property, and there's no financial anything going on with that. I guess I'm giving my house to my trust for $0, but that would still count as this situation. Or like we talked about, a cash purchase of a house. So they're not going through the traditional way of trying to finance that purchase. It's just, hey, I have a bunch of cash. Let me give it to you so I can purchase the house. Those are the kind of transfers we're looking at here and what counts under this prong.
And just to be clear, and maybe you're going to cover this with the exceptions, but this would not involve, you're not reporting if you're just purchasing a home paying cash between two individuals.
That's the third prong, actually. So
I'll let you.
You're good.
All right,
You're
cool.
good. Third prong, property has to be transferred to a certain type of entity or trust. They call it a transferee entity or a transferee trust. So exactly what you're saying. If I'm giving my house to an individual and they're paying me in cash, and that individual is going to sign off as the transferee, the buyer, then you don't need to report it. It has to be an entity or a trust. And the entity, LLCs count, corporations count, partnerships count. They have a couple others but those are probably the biggest that we see for an entity. And a trust, I mean, we're in the estate planning business. A trust is a trust. You set up something for the benefit of others. So those are really the three big prongs. There's exceptions amongst those three, but we're not going to get into those. And I think we've dealt into the most.
So let me give you an example, and then you can run through and apply these prongs and then tell me whether or not an exception applies. For the client that called me this week, she came to see us to put an estate plan in place. It involves the use of a revocable trust. However, the property that's in question, her primary residence, is owned by her individually. She purchased it with a mortgage. So she had a mortgage lender lend her the money. The mortgage company paid the buyers or the sellers so that they could collect their money from that transaction and move on. She now lives in the home and has to make the monthly mortgage payments. And her question for me was, when I come in a few days here to sign my trust and my deed, are we going to need to report this transaction to FinCEN?
So if we run it through those, the three prongs first, right? The property in question, is it residential real property? Saying it's a primary residence, she lives there, it's a home, it was built for that. I would say yes, it's residential real property.
So she meets the first prong.
First one. Second one has to be a non-finance transfer. So again, she owns it. The deed is in her name. We're giving it to a trust. That is the transfer we're talking about here. It's not the transfer when she purchased the home with the mortgage. We're taking her name and putting it in the trust name. So she's giving it to the trust. The trust isn't paying anything for it. So that I would say is a non-finance
transfer.
Third, the entity or the buyer, the person getting the property, the thing getting the property has to be an entity or a trust. In this case, it's a revocable living trust, her trust. Yes, I would say that it would be the entity's getting, or the trust is getting it. So it would meet that third prong too. So sounds like it. But let's not forget the exceptions.
Okay. All right, exceptions.
Let's not forget the exceptions. That's the fourth part of the test. Does an exception apply here? And luckily, for this particular situation, there is one. They have a whole list of exceptions. I didn't count how many there were, but it's a whole list. And one of them.
There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 so far.
So 8. There you go. One of the big ones right here. It says if the transfer is for no consideration made by an individual, either alone or with their spouse, to a trust of which the individual spouse, or both are the settlers or grantors, or in our language, the trust makers.
Bing, 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 bing.
Right there.
And part of it's in red. A transfer does not need to be reported if it meets any of these exceptions. So there's her answer.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't need to be reported. An exception applies. I think
Good, because how many times a month are we doing that?
I mean, every estate plan we do, basically, I think that's the reason the government definitely put this exception in. They know it happens a lot. Public policy, I think, is we want homes to be in trusts and we
Yeah.
want them to have that protection. And so
Not only that, but it'd be hard to launder money in the circumstance that we just laid out, right? There's no exchange of value. There's no exchange of dollars. It's just that she's moving her house out of her individual name and putting it back into her name as trustee of her trust, so that in this case, she can avoid a probate if something were to happen to her, or if, and also to protect her kids when she passes away, to make sure it passes on to them.
Yeah.
So hard to launder money through that situation, therefore not reportable. So for most of the people listening to this, that's going to be the answer.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that, yeah, this sounds like a big deal. It is a big deal in a variety of circumstances. However, the one that we deal with the most commonly, it's a reportable transaction.
Exactly. Yeah. I just want to lay out just some of the other quick exceptions that apply that they're big. We don't deal with them a lot ourselves, but if an individual is getting a piece of residential real estate by terms of a will or a trust because somebody's passed away and now they're getting the property, that also doesn't need to be reported. In the case of a divorce, that doesn't need to be reported. In the case of a bankruptcy, doesn't need to be reported. They have exceptions. They have carved out a couple things. There's more than that. Those are just kind of the big ones that I saw reading through it.
But again, any transaction, another one is any transaction supervised by any court in the United States, whether it's a federal court, a state court, a county court.
Yeah, and well, I don't deal with this a lot, but I know that people do this, that it has been made to a qualified intermediary for the purpose of a like-kind exchange, the Section 1031 exchanges. That's a different ballgame, but
yeah, because it's hard to launder money there because all you're doing is you're trading one property for another similar type of property, and you're doing it in a way that avoids triggering tax consequences. So that makes sense. Okay, so let me give you another example. Hey, this happens on a regular basis in our practice as well. I have a client who they have the exact situation that we just laid out in the previous example for their primary residence, but they also own two residential properties. Let's say one of them's a duplex, and the other one is a condo, and they rent these to other individuals. And so the advice that we've given them as their legal counsel is that to protect them from liability concerns, somebody getting hurt on that property and suing, we're recommending that they use a limited liability company to own and operate those residential rental properties. When we record the deed to move those to that condo and that duplex into LLCs, can you run through the 4 prongs again and tell me whether or not those clients would be subject to the reporting requirements?
yeah, let's do it. So first one, are they residential real property? So condo in one, a duplex in another. We had said that residential real property is 1 to 4 units. So a duplex would count in that situation. Condo, I mean, people, that's the point, is to be a residence for somebody. So yes, both of them fall under prong number 1. They're both residential real property. So next one, non-finance transfer. Just like with just like in a trust, we're just trying to move a piece of property from our client's name into a name of an LLC. There's no real money being transferred at all. The LLC is not buying it. They're not really paying any cash. So there's really no financing that's needed from a mortgage company or anything. So yes, these are both non-finance transfers because there's no financing involved at all.
Okay.
Third, the transferee, the person or the thing getting the property has to be an entity or a trust. And limited liability companies, LLCs, are flat out written out as an entity in this test.
For sure, a business entity.
So they would qualify at that third prong is met too because we have an entity that's taking the property. So all 3 of those work. So we're now just looking to see if there's an exception for LLCs getting property in the situation. And They have a whole list of exceptions of what's a transferee entity. I will tell you right now, limited liability company is not on there. A limited liability company to hold residential real property, not on there. I mean, what's on there is like banks and credit unions. So it's already a heavily regulated entities. But again, if this is just an LLC that I'm creating to hold my own property, there's no exception for that. So in this particular situation, those transfers would need to be reported.
Okay. So the client is going to have to do a FinCEN report for both deed transfers of the condo and the duplex into LLCs.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Now, and just to make it clear, I mean, it's not necessarily the client that needs to do the reporting, but whoever is helping them with the transfers. That's who the responsibility lies on to make these reportings. I mean, I don't know if we want to go further into that, but just know it needs to be done. The client would want to make sure it's done anyways, so that's part of it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So what about commercial buildings?
Commercial buildings, this applies to residential real property, and they're pretty clear on that. It's residential. So if it's strictly commercial building, commercial activity, it doesn't meet that first prong. So it's not needed. It doesn't need to be reported in that situation.
All right. What's the consequence if this reporting's not done properly or if it's not done at all?
Now, that's a good question. So there's a time frame. First off, you have to report it by the end of the month of the following month that the transfer has been done, or 30 days, whichever is more or less. I don't know that part. Anyway,
Whichever's.
I think it's later. Yeah. So you have some time to make sure it gets reported, at least, thankfully. If it's not reported, then there's a civil penalty of $1,430.
Wow.
For that. So it is kind of a high price. We want to make sure these get reported for sure. And I mean, it's higher if I don't know how FinCEN will do it, but they'll prove negligently not reporting. There's a criminal penalty at that point. It's even higher. And I don't remember that number, but
Probably if you were doing it on a repeated basis
Yeah.
and reporting, they're going to look at you as a bigger fish and they're going to fry you harder than they would somebody who accidentally didn't report, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then the next question might be like, what needs to be reported to the government? It's basic information. And when I say basic, name, address, what's the property in question? What's the name of the trust? What's the name of the business? We also
Actual owners.
and the beneficial owners. That's the other big one. And beneficial owners, it can mean a couple of different things. Quite simply put, somebody has an interest in it is probably the easiest way to explain it here. That's who needs to be reported. A lot of them we also need to report, like social security numbers, or it was saying if you're from a different jurisdiction, meaning you're not from the US, then like the number you have in the country, in your country, or like your passport number, things like that. So they need a number. They need something to identify you with. They don't need IDs, which is great, but they do need a number. So I mean, it's a lot of information that needs to be reported. I've looked at the form briefly. It's kind of, again, it's a reporting person would have to fill that out. So whoever is helping you is the one who fills it out on that part.
Well, if I'm just a homeowner who owns a couple of rental properties and I create an LLC myself and I go ahead and record the deed, putting my LLC or my rental property into my own LLC, who's required to report in that instance? There is no professional involved.
There's no professional involved. The government they call it a cascade. It's a list of people that, like, if this person's involved, that's who does the reporting. Or if this person does a transaction, that's who does the reporting. There's 7 layers to it. The first one, it's a person who's at the closing or settlement agent on the closing or settlement statement. Again, if you're doing it yourself, you probably don't have that. That's like a title company who's helping with the documents and whatnot. 2, it's the person that prepares those documents. Again, you probably don't have that. 3, the person that files with the recordation office, the deed or other instrument that transfers property. So if I'm creating my own deed and I go down to the county recorder's office and I record it, then I would be the one that has to report it. So whoever and you probably stop there. Whoever's recording the deed, that's who has to report it.
Okay. The person would be the owner of the property at that point.
Yeah. There's 4 more layers after that. The person that underwrites on owner's title insurance policy, the person that disperses in any form, including from an escrow account, trust account, or lawyer's trust account, the greater amount of funds, the person that provides an evaluation on the status of the title, and lastly, the person that prepares the deed. So, I mean, they're trying to think of when we're making these transfers, like what needs to be done to actually get it done. So they're trying to hit those people up as who needs to report these.
When we were talking about this kind of in preparation for this podcast, a question came up. What about a seller finance transaction?
Yeah.
And so I've just done very, very basic AI focused queries on that. And I asked specifically, and just take this for what it's worth, because we haven't done any due diligence to research it in depth. But the quick answer from AI is that seller finance transfers where a trust or an LLC is either the buyer or the seller, those are subject to the reporting requirements. And I don't see where any exceptions apply. I mean, there would be exceptions if it was due to a death, a divorce, bankruptcy, but in this case, I don't think that works, because those are no consideration transfers. In this case, there is consideration. It's just that there's not a traditional mortgage lender involved. The mortgage or the mortgage lender or the bank is the trust. So in those circumstances, it looks like you would also have to report those transactions to FinCEN. So
I agree.
that is something that it's like any of these new federal rules that come out. We do our initial podcast episode and then we wait 6 months and more clarification comes down the pipeline. We may need to revisit this and update based on, adjustments that get made. There's probably a good chance that litigation occurs around this, that somebody tries to get this declared unconstitutional.
And I'm glad you brought that up. There already is litigation.
Yeah. So the second these things hit, there are attorneys, there are parties out there that monitor this stuff that are in the industry. They probably had the lawsuit already drafted and ready to go. And the second that rule became effective, I mean, because did it become effective 5 days ago?
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's any transfers after March 1st. So if you did any of your transfers before March 1st, you're fine. But March 1st onward is when it is in effect.
So within 5 days of the rule going into effect, lawsuits have been filed. Being said, our position has always been, unless and until there's a final ruling and a pretty clear indication from, multiple sources that's been verified, we're going to advise that our clients go ahead and follow the requirement, whether we agree with the concept or not, right? Because $1,400 criminal penalties, not the kind of thing that you want to be inadvertently or intentionally getting yourself tangled up in.
For sure. I agree with you. That's something we're going to be talking to our clients about and still recommending.
So I think the biggest takeaway for a lot of people, they're going to be worried that, oh my gosh, we did an estate plan last year and we deeded our house into a trust. Are we subject to this? No, because it didn't happen before March 1 of 2020, or it didn't happen after of 2026. And the next group is going to be people that are doing estate planning right now, and they know they're about to sign ownership of their home over to the trustee of the trust, which is typically them.
Yeah.
And they're going to freak out and wonder if this applies to them. Based on the scenarios that we've just looked at and the analysis that we've performed, the answer would be no. If you're just moving your home that you've purchased, whether it's paid for, whether it still has a mortgage on it, if you're just transferring it into your trust to avoid probate or to protect it from other problems, then you're probably not subject to this. The other scenario is we're going to have people that own rental properties. And in that case, we're going to be telling people, yes, you are subject to it, but it's a relatively straightforward reporting process. Doesn't cost anything, meaning there's no fees that the government charges to report this. So we'll get that dialed in and we'll be able to help our clients with it. But biggest thing is if you are deeding property that you own into a limited liability company and you're not involving any kind of professional in that process, understand that you're going to want to make sure you get proper guidance on this, because it looks like by all indications, you would be subject to that reporting requirement. If you're doing it yourself, you are the person who's responsible to
Yeah,
make that reporting occurs. So
that's right.
I think that covers it.
I agree. Yeah, biggest takeaway for me is you have a question, come talk to us about it. For most people, this probably won't be applied and probably won't affect them, but make sure you talk to us or somebody who knows what they're doing on it to make sure that you know you're not missing something.
Yeah. And don't rely, for the most part, I would say the media is really bad at reporting on this kind of stuff. Like, that's why I got the kind of panicked phone call and email this week that I got, because they read something somewhere. And I mean, I don't know the source. I don't know exactly, but it probably wasn't reported clearly. There's lots of ambiguity. So just be careful the sources that you rely on, and always seek out a qualified attorney if you're looking for legal advice. All right. Well, thanks for being with me today, Brian. And thanks everyone for listening. And we hope you have a great rest of your day. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Yep, sounds great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Legacy Lawyers with Michael Haslam and Nathan Croxford. We give you the juicy detail of cases that our law firm has dealt with. We take out the lawyer talk and legalese and show you what options some of our clients had to choose from to fix their situation. The effects of not doing planning can be devastating. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Voyant Legal. Call us at 801-951-0500 or send us an email at team@voyantlegal.com. And for commonly asked questions, hit voyantlegal.com/resources. We'll see you next time.